I never thought a mug of lukewarm coffee would be the thing that shattered the picture I'd been clinging to my entire life. My name is Esme Harper. I'm 26 years old, and I work as a nurse in a small coastal town in Maine. My days are usually a cycle of 12-hour shifts, quick grocery runs, and quiet evenings in my small rented apartment. I've always liked the rhythm. It's stable, predictable, nothing like the chaos that fills the Harper house. For years, my parents' house had been a second skin to me. The cedar siding, the creaky porch steps, the way the sea breeze carried the scent of salt and pine into the kitchen. It wasn't just a house. It was a piece of my grandfather, a man who believed in hard work and fairness, who taught me how to plant roses and repair broken window latches. He always said, "This house will be yours one day, Esme. You'll take care of it like I did." And I believed him. That morning, I drove over just to grab my birth certificate. I was applying for a new nursing license in another state and needed it for paperwork. It was supposed to be a quick in and out, 5 minutes tops. But the moment I stepped through the front door, something felt off. The living room, usually cluttered with my mother's half-finished knitting projects and dad's fishing gear, was strangely formal. There was a man in a gray suit sitting at the coffee table, his leather briefcase open, stacks of papers neatly arranged. My father sat upright in the armchair, my mother perched on the couch, and my older brother, Adam, leaned back casually like he owned the place. I froze. No one noticed me at first. They were too busy watching the lawyer flip through documents. Then I saw it. At the top of the papers in bold letters, transfer of property. I shifted my weight, the floorboard creaked, and 4 heads turned toward me. My mother's expression flickered annoyance, not guilt. "Esme, what are you doing here?" I came to get my birth certificate," I managed to say. Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. "We're in the middle of something important. You can come back later." But my eyes were already scanning the table. I saw our address, the parcel number, the signatures, my father's, the lawyer's, and at the bottom, Adam's name in big, confident strokes. My coffee cup trembled in my hand. "What is this?" my mother sighed, as if I was interrupting a TV show. "This is what's best for the family, Esme. You'll understand one day." "What's best for the family?" I repeated. "You're transferring the house to Adam?" Adam smirked slightly, not meeting my eyes. "It's just paperwork, Esme. Relax." Relax, that word. The way he said it, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Like everything my grandfather promised me had been a fantasy. "This house was supposed to be," Dad cut me off sharply. "Adam is starting a family. He'll be getting married soon. It makes sense for him to inherit the house. You have your job, your apartment, you're doing fine on your own." The room started to spin. All those years of coming over to mow the lawn, to repaint the porch, to fix the gutters after storms, because Adam's busy with college or Adam's working on his career. I'd done it all, believing I was preserving something for both of us. But clearly, it was never ours. It was always his. I placed the mug down on the nearest surface before my shaking hands dropped it. "Are you serious?" Mom stood, smoothing her cardigan like she was straightening the situation itself. "Don't make a scene. This is a happy decision. Adam will make the house shine again, you'll see." Adam finally looked at me then, and it wasn't guilt I saw in his eyes, it was ownership. The kind that had been there all along, waiting for its paperwork to catch up. My mouth went dry. I wanted to scream, to throw the documents into the fireplace, to make them all see how absurd this was. Instead, I turned and walked out the door, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the waves outside. As I drove away, the house shrank in the rearview mirror until it was just a speck behind me. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I wasn't just angry, I was awake. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. I don't even remember stopping at red lights. My hands were locked on the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. As soon as I stepped through the door, the quiet hit me like a wall. No murmuring voices, no clinking of dishes, no "Esme, can you run to the store real quick?" It was just me, the hum of the fridge, and the sound of my own uneven breathing. I sank onto the couch and stared at the blank TV screen. My mind replayed every word from that living room, over and over like a cruel loop. "You have your job, your apartment, you're doing fine on your own." Translation, "You don't belong here anymore." A lump formed in my throat, the kind that doesn't go away no matter how many deep breaths you take. I tried to push it down with rational thoughts. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe the house transfer was temporary. Maybe they'd talk to me about it later. But deep down, I knew better. My parents never explained things to me, they announced them. Growing up, I was the problem solver, the peacemaker, the reliable one. When Adam dented the family car, I covered for him. When Mom forgot to pay the electric bill, I used my babysitting money to keep the lights on. When Dad got sick, I postponed my college plans to help around the house while Adam focused on his degree. He got the praise. I got the chores. I remembered one summer afternoon when I was 10. Grandpa had set up 2 wooden chairs in the backyard and taught me how to replace broken shingles. The salty wind whipped through my hair as he handed me a hammer. "Strong hands, steady mind," he'd said. "You're my little builder, Esme. One day this house will be yours to take care of." I'd believed him with my whole heart. After he passed away, I tried to keep that promise alive. Every holiday, every weekend off, I went back to fix something, clean something, repaint something. Adam visited twice a year, usually to borrow tools. The more I thought about it, the more a hot, bitter anger rose in my chest, not just at my parents, but at myself. I had trusted them so blindly. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, a knot of betrayal sitting heavy in my stomach. By the next afternoon, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for explanations that would never come. I drove back to the house. Mom's car wasn't there, and Dad was likely out fishing with his friends. Perfect. I parked on the street, walked up the familiar front steps, and let myself in with my old key. The smell hit me instantly. Lemon cleaner, salt air, and something faintly floral, like the house itself hadn't changed, even though everything else had. My old room was still there, though it had become a glorified storage closet over the years. Boxes were stacked against the walls. The faded posters of constellations still clung to the peeling paint. I ran my fingers along the edge of my desk, feeling the grooves where I'd carved little stars as a kid. Something told me to check the bottom drawer, the one Grandpa had installed a false panel in when I was 14. He'd called it your secret hiding place. Back then, I'd kept candy and crumpled notes from friends inside. I pulled the drawer open. The panel was still there. I pried it loose with a letter opener, and there, tucked in the space, was a thin manila envelope. My name was written on it in Grandpa's neat handwriting. My heart skipped. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, and carefully opened the flap. Inside were several folded papers. The first thing I saw was his will, dated 8 years ago, notarized, official. I scanned the lines quickly, my hands trembling. He had left the house to me, not shared between siblings, not as a family home. Solely to me. There was no clause about Adam inheriting anything. In fact, the will mentioned a trust fund for maintenance expenses, with my name as the primary beneficiary. I flipped to the last page, his signature, the notary's stamp. Real, legal. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. All the heat in my chest crystallized into something sharp and cold. They hadn't just made a family decision. They had erased a legal document. I stuffed the will back into the envelope and tucked it under my sweater. My pulse was racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't know how, but I suddenly knew one thing for sure. They didn't just betray me emotionally. They crossed a line they couldn't uncross. I drove home, clutching that envelope against my chest like it was a heartbeat I didn't want anyone else to hear. Every stop sign felt like a threat. Every car that passed made me glance at my rearview mirror. I wasn't being followed, of course, but paranoia comes easy when you've just realized your family committed fraud against you. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, closed the blinds, and spread the documents out across the kitchen table. I read every line slowly this time. The house, the trust fund, the maintenance clauses, it was all in my name. Grandpa had been thorough, and the notary's seal made it airtight. But the dates hit me. 8 years ago, notarized in the same county where I grew up. Which meant if the house had been legally transferred to Adam now, someone had to override or forge this document. I needed help. That's when I thought of Clara. We met during my nursing program. She'd gone on to law school, specializing in estate and property law. Clara had always had a sharp mind, the kind that saw loopholes before anyone else did. We stayed close, and if there was anyone I trusted to tell me if I was losing my mind, it was her. I called her. "Hey," she answered cheerfully, the sound of street noise in the background. "Clara, do you have time tonight? I found something important." There was a pause. She knew my tone. Serious, important, or Esme overthinking important? Serious, like legal serious. Within an hour, she was at my apartment, wearing her usual trench coat and carrying her laptop. I shoved the documents toward her without much preamble. She read silently, her eyebrows slowly knitting together. "This is valid," she said finally, tapping the notary stamp. "Completely valid, and you're telling me they signed the house over to Adam?" I nodded, my jaw tight. She sat back, letting out a low whistle. "Then something's off. This kind of document doesn't just disappear. For them to transfer the property, they'd either have to contest the will legally, which would take time, or," her voice trailed off. "Or forge something," I finished for her. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Or forge something." A strange mix of relief and fury bubbled in my chest. Relief because I wasn't crazy. Fury because that meant this wasn't just a cruel family decision, it was a crime. Clara leaned forward. First step, we need the official property transfer records from the county clerk. Everything leaves a paper trail. If they forged something, it'll be there. The next day, after my shift ended, we drove to the county records office. The clerk behind the counter, a woman with a tight bun and zero interest in human drama, pulled up the property file. There was a transfer 6 months ago, she said flatly. From Gerald Harper Trust, your grandfather's, to Adam Harper. Looks like Esme Harper signed a waiver of inheritance. Clara and I exchanged a glance. Can I see that waiver? Clara asked. The clerk handed us a printed copy. And there it was, my name, my signature, except it wasn't mine. My stomach lurched. The signature looked close enough that someone who didn't know me might not question it, but I recognized the uneven loop in the H, the way the tail of the P curved unnaturally. I'd seen that handwriting before. Adam, I whispered. He used to forge my signature on school permission slips when we were kids. Dad always laughed about how convincing he was. Clara leaned in. Esme, this is textbook fraud. If you didn't sign this, they're in very deep trouble. I swallowed hard, staring at the paper like it might burst into flames. They forged my signature to steal the house. Clara looked at me serious now. You have 2 options. 1, confront them, but that'll give them time to cover their tracks. 2, build your case quietly. Collect every piece of evidence you can. When you strike once. I didn't even have to think. Option 2. Good, she said. Then we need to get copies of everything. Property records, trust documents, bank statements. And you'll need to document that you found this will independently. The clerk charged us for copies, and as the printer spat out page after page, a kind of icy focus settled over me. I'd spent years being the reliable one, the one who didn't make waves. But that day, standing under the fluorescent lights of the county office, holding a forged signature with my name on it, something shifted. This wasn't just family betrayal anymore. This was war. Over the next 2 weeks, my life split in 2. By day, I was Nurse Esme, calm, collected, focused on patient charts and IV drips. By night, I became someone I'd never imagined I'd have to be, a quiet investigator, sifting through layers of my family's lies. Clara and I built a plan that felt almost surgical. We'd collect everything slowly, carefully, leaving no trace that might tip them off. If my parents or Adam suspected I knew, they'd bury their mistakes deeper. The first step was observation. One Saturday morning, I drove past the family house pretending to be on my way to the farmer's market. The place looked different. Adam's truck was parked in the driveway, and through the half-open garage, I spotted stacks of new flooring, paint cans, and what looked like high-end appliances still in their boxes. They were renovating. Through the windows, I could see Adam walking around with Claire, his fiancée, pointing at walls, laughing, taking selfies. My stomach clenched. This wasn't just about taking the house. He was turning it into their dream home like I'd never existed. The same house where I spent weekends fixing leaky pipes and sanding railings while he was busy building his future. I parked down the street, out of sight, and watched. The lawyer's voice from that day still echoed in my head, transfer of property. I took photos from my car, time-stamped, discreet. Not because I needed proof of renovations, but because they could show Adam exercising ownership before any official transfer explanations they might invent later. That afternoon, Clara and I sat at my kitchen table again, surrounded by piles of documents. She'd requested financial records related to the Harper Family Trust, the one Grandpa had set up to maintain the house and the land. They had to use this trust for the property transfer, she explained. If Adam's taking over the house, the trust would either dissolve or shift beneficiaries. There should be a trail. When the records arrived by courier the next day, the first thing I noticed was the date of dissolution, 6 months ago, same as the property transfer. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. Page after page of withdrawals, large sums, regular intervals, all signed off by authorized parties. One of those signatures was, again, mine, except I'd never authorized anything. Clara flipped through the pages, her face growing more serious. Esme, these aren't just withdrawals for home maintenance. These are investments. Look. She pointed at a list of wire transfers, $50,000 here, $80,000 there, funneled into something called Horizon Ridge Ventures LLC. I frowned. What's that? She was already typing on her laptop. Within minutes, she found the registration. Horizon Ridge Ventures LLC. Registered to Adam Harper. I felt my breath catch in my throat. He used the trust fund to invest in his own company. More like steal from it, Clara said, her voice like steel. "This is straight-up financial fraud. The trust fund was meant to preserve the property. Instead, he's been siphoning it into this shell company for almost 2 years." I stared at the numbers. $400,000. That was roughly the amount Grandpa had mentioned when I was a teen, enough to keep the house running for decades. It was gone. Gone into Adam's pet project, which, judging by his track record, was probably failing spectacularly. He'd always been the dreamer, the one with big ideas that never went anywhere. Meanwhile, I was the fixer, the safety net. And now he'd used my name, my inheritance, my grandfather's legacy to fund his fantasy. I pressed my palms to my eyes. A mix of rage and disbelief coursed through me. "Clara, this isn't just about the house anymore." She nodded grimly. "No. This is a civil case and potentially a criminal one. Forgery, trust fund fraud, misappropriation of assets. If this goes to court, he and your parents could be in serious legal trouble." My mind reeled. I remembered how, at every holiday dinner, Mom would beam with pride talking about Adam's business venture. I'd rolled my eyes, thinking it was just another hobby. All along, it was my grandfather's money fueling it. "I want everything," I said finally. "Every document, every receipt. Every transfer, we build this right." Clara gave me a small, fierce smile. "Now you're talking." From that day, I started carrying a small recorder with me whenever I visited my parents' house. I'd pretend to drop by casually, bringing baked goods or checking in on Mom. Meanwhile, I'd keep my ears open. One afternoon, as Mom poured me tea in the kitchen, she sighed, "You know, if you just signed the papers yourself, this would have been so much easier." Adam's handwriting is good, but it gave me a heart attack when the clerk almost noticed the loop in your H. I froze mid-sip. My recorder caught every word. She didn't even realize what she'd admitted. I walked out of the house that day with more than tea. I walked out with ammunition. After that conversation with Mom, something inside me clicked into place. It was the sound of a lock turning, not in defeat, but in resolve. For weeks, I'd been walking around with this invisible weight, a mix of hurt and disbelief. But now I had more than emotions. I had evidence. Real, undeniable proof that what they'd done wasn't just morally wrong, it was criminal. The key now was timing. If I confronted them too soon, they'd circle the wagons, bury the paper trail, and rewrite the story like they always had. I'd seen it happen before, on a smaller scale. Adam wrecked Dad's truck once when we were teenagers, and somehow by the end of the night, it was my fault for not stopping him. That night had taught me something I never forgot: they rewrite reality fast. So this time, I wouldn't give them that chance. I started showing up to family dinners again. Mom's face softened every time I arrived, maybe believing I'd accepted the situation. Dad patted my shoulder. Adam made small talk about work. They were so used to me smoothing things over that my presence lulled them into comfort. They didn't realize every word, every careless comment, every document casually left on the counter was being cataloged in my mind, and sometimes on my recorder. I played my role flawlessly. I laughed at Claire's stories about floral arrangements, listened as Adam bragged about the wedding of the year they were planning to host right there in my grandfather's house. He talked about transforming the backyard into something out of a magazine. I smiled, nodded, refilled my wine glass. On the inside, I was memorizing every vendor's name, every contractor mentioned, every timeline. Clara and I met almost every night after my shifts. My kitchen table turned into a war room. Piles of notarized documents, copies of bank transfers, printouts of property filings, audio transcripts, and Grandpa's original will in a clear plastic sleeve like a sacred text. "You know," Clara said one night, twirling a pen between her fingers, "you're building a case that's not just solid, it's bulletproof. When you strike, it's going to be surgical." I glanced at the wall where I'd pinned a calendar. On one date, circled in red, was Adam and Claire's engagement party. It would be held at the house. Dozens of guests, local business owners, extended family, the perfect moment for the Harper family to show off their success. It would also be the perfect moment for their facade to start cracking. As the date approached, the house buzzed with activity. Trucks came and went. New landscaping appeared overnight. Strings of lights hung over the porch. Claire posted daily Instagram stories of our dream home coming to life, and every time I watched one, a mix of fury and strange calm washed over me. They had no idea what was coming. One evening, I arrived at the house to help with decorations. Adam was giving instructions to a caterer in the living room. When he saw me, he grinned like the king of his castle. "Hey sis, good to see you finally on board with everything." "Of course," I said smoothly. "It's family, right?" He laughed, totally oblivious. As the sun set, I walked through the backyard where I used to pick roses with Grandpa. The flower beds were covered with temporary flooring for the party. It almost made me sad. Almost. I whispered under my breath, "Don't worry, Grandpa, I've got this." That night, back in my apartment, I wrote down everything: dates, names, overheard conversations, digital timestamps. Clara helped me organize it like a legal narrative. The more we pieced it together, the more undeniable the story became. Grandpa's original will clearly naming me sole heir. A forged waiver of inheritance with my signature. Property transferred to Adam 6 months ago. Dissolution of the trust fund followed by $400,000 in misappropriated withdrawals to Adam's company. A recorded confession from Mom casually admitting the forgery. It wasn't just family betrayal. It was a case with teeth. The night before the engagement party, I lay in bed wide awake. But this time, it wasn't because I was hurt. It was because I was ready. Ready to stop being the quiet one. Ready to stop letting them narrate my story for me. I wasn't just Esme the dutiful daughter anymore. I was Esme the heir. Esme the woman with the truth. Esme who wasn't afraid to fight. The day of the engagement party dawned bright and clear, like the world had no idea it was about to witness the opening act of a family war. I woke up earlier than usual, made myself a cup of strong coffee, and stood at the window, watching the fog roll back over the harbor. My hands didn't shake anymore. My stomach wasn't in knots. For the first time since I found those papers in my old desk drawer, I felt steady. I slipped into a simple dark green dress, nothing too flashy, just elegant enough to blend in. Clara had told me to play the part of the dutiful sister, at least until the right moment. "You're not here to blow anything up today," she reminded me over the phone that morning. "You're here to watch, to listen, and to make sure everything that happens is documented. This is the social stage. Let them build their house of cards in public." I drove to the family home slowly, taking the scenic route along the coast. It wasn't nerves, it was strategy. I wanted to arrive late enough that the party would already be in full swing, conversations flowing, champagne glasses clinking. When I pulled into the street, the transformation of the house was almost unrecognizable. White tents covered the backyard. Fairy lights wrapped around the porch beams. A string quartet played soft music near the garden archway, the same archway Grandpa had built with his own hands 30 years ago. It was now wrapped in roses, pale pink, and ivory like something out of a bridal magazine. Claire's aesthetic, no doubt. Guests milled about, sipping champagne, taking selfies in front of floral backdrops. The town's mayor was there, shaking Adam's hand. My parents hovered nearby, glowing like royalty, greeting everyone with polished smiles. I parked down the street and walked up the path, my heels clicking against the freshly paved walkway Adam had bragged about. When Mom saw me, her face lit up in a way that used to mean love, but now only looked like relief. "Esme, sweetheart, I'm so glad you came," she said, pulling me into a quick hug that smelled like her usual lavender perfume. "Of course I came," I said smoothly, smiling like everything was perfectly fine. "It's Adam's big day." Dad patted my shoulder. "That's my girl, always supportive." Supportive, if only they knew. Adam spotted me next. He was wearing a tailored navy suit, hair slicked back, looking like the golden boy he always believed he was. Claire, beside him, was radiant in a cream dress, the kind that screamed future Mrs. Perfect. "Esme," Adam called out. "Glad you made it." Claire was just saying it wouldn't be the same without you. I gave Claire a polite smile. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." She squeezed my hand. "It means a lot that you're here." Her voice was warm, genuine, and I hated that part of me almost believed it. I didn't know yet that she would become one of the most unexpected players in this entire game. The party swelled with laughter and clinking glasses. I drifted through the crowd, playing my role. I greeted distant cousins, neighbors, family friends who'd known me since I was in pigtails. "Esme, you must be so proud of your brother." Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, gushed as she grabbed my hand. "He's really making something of himself." I smiled tightly. "He always does." Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted Clara. She wasn't mingling, she was working. Dressed in a muted navy jumpsuit, she blended in as a +1 for one of her friends. But I could tell by the way she scanned the yard that she was cataloging everything. We set up a plan. She'd take photos, short videos, grab names of guests and vendors. When this went to court, their engagement party would become a timeline exhibit, proof that Adam and my parents treated the house as their own while the forged paperwork was still under investigation. I slipped away toward the back porch where the catering team had set up a temporary prep station. The chef was giving instructions to a staff member about where to plug in the heating trays. I pretended to check my phone while listening. "Make sure the Harper family signs the invoice tonight," one of the caterers said. "We don't want another delay like with the flooring." Flooring. Another expense probably paid with stolen trust money. Clara and I would get that invoice later. A loud clink pulled everyone's attention to the front. Adam had climbed onto a small wooden stage, built where Grandpa's vegetable garden used to be, and tapped his champagne glass with a spoon. "Everyone," he called out, smiling broadly. "Thank you all for being here. Claire and I are so grateful to celebrate with you in this beautiful home. This house has been part of our family for generations, and now it's the start of our future together." The crowd clapped. I stood at the back, hidden partially by a cluster of hanging lights, watching him bask in admiration. He kept talking about legacy, about the next chapter of the Harper story. I wondered if any of those words would choke him once he was standing in a courtroom. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Dad had his arm around her shoulders. They looked like the perfect family, proud parents, successful son, dutiful daughter standing in the crowd. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible one. I felt like the quiet storm on the horizon. After the speech, guests mingled again. I chatted lightly with people, making mental notes. Vendors, dates, overheard bits of conversation about invoices and planning. Clara sent me discreet texts from across the yard, each one a puzzle piece. As the sun dipped low, the fairy lights flickered on, bathing the backyard in a soft glow. Music swelled. Couples danced on the temporary platform. Adam and Claire twirled under the roses, photographers snapping photos like this was a fairy tale, and I stood in the shadows, utterly calm. The house looked beautiful. My family looked happy. Everything appeared perfect, which meant they were exactly where I needed them to be. The morning after the engagement party, the house was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. I drove by slowly on my way to work. The tents were gone, the lights taken down, but the archway still stood, a skeletal reminder of the performance that had played out the night before. I parked for a minute down the block and stared at the house. It looked peaceful, almost serene, as if nothing sinister had happened within those walls. But I knew better. Behind those painted shutters and polished porch steps were forged signatures, stolen funds, and a betrayal that cut deeper than anyone on the outside could imagine. At the hospital, my day passed in a blur of patients, monitors, and surgical prep. But even in the chaos, part of my mind was somewhere else, at my kitchen table, where Clara was probably already working through the next steps. Sure enough, when I got home that evening, she was sitting at my table with her laptop open, a pile of manila folders stacked neatly beside her. She looked up when I walked in. "Hey, legal assassin," she said with a grin. I laughed weakly, kicking off my shoes. "Please tell me you have good news." "Depends on how you define good," she replied, spinning the laptop toward me. "I've drafted the formal request for property transfer documents from the county clerk and sent a notice of potential contestation to the Harper legal representative on record. We're officially in the system now. No more whispers in the dark." I scanned the documents. It felt surreal to see my family's names on legal letterhead. Adam Harper, Gerald and Margaret Harper. And mine, Esme Harper, as the contesting heir. "They'll receive it tomorrow morning," Clara said. "Certified mail, which means by tomorrow afternoon your parents will probably call you." I nodded slowly. "Let them." She leaned back, folding her arms. "This is where it gets interesting. Up until now, they've been completely unaware that you've been building a case. This will be their first jolt." That night, I barely slept. But it wasn't the old restless, heartbroken insomnia. It was something sharper. Anticipation. The next afternoon, the call came. "Esme," Mom's voice was tight-clipped. "We received some kind of letter from a lawyer, something about the property." "Yeah," I said evenly. "That's from Clara. I've decided to review the legality of the transfer." Silence, then a sharp exhale. "Esme, this is unnecessary. You're overreacting. This is family business." "It's my business," I corrected her. Her tone hardened. "We've always done what's best for this family. You have a good job, your own place. Why are you making this complicated? Because you forged my name, because you stole from me, because Grandpa trusted me, not Adam." But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said, "Because I have questions, and I want answers." She huffed. "We'll talk when your father gets home." Of course, she always needed Dad as backup. An hour later, Dad called. His voice was lower, steadier, the classic voice of reason he used whenever he wanted to control the narrative. "Esme, honey, what's going on here?" he asked. "We got this legal thing from your friend. Is this about the house? You know Adam, going to take care of it. It's the practical choice." "Practical?" My voice came out colder than I expected. "Was it practical to forge my signature too?" Silence. I didn't push further. I let the silence sit there, heavy and accusing. He finally cleared his throat. I don't know what you're talking about. Then I guess the court will, I said quietly. He snapped then, just a little. You're being dramatic, Esme. This isn't you. You're letting that lawyer friend of yours fill your head with nonsense. The old me would have flinched at that, at being called dramatic, at the implication that I was too emotional to think for myself. But the woman standing in her kitchen with legal documents spread out like a battle map didn't flinch anymore. I'll see you at the family dinner on Sunday, I said, then hung up. Clara looked up from the couch. Well. They're rattled, I said. She grinned. Good. Rattled people make mistakes, and mistakes leave trails. Over the next few days, things moved fast. The county clerk sent over certified copies of the transfer records. Clara combed through every page, highlighting dates and inconsistencies. She found a gap between the trust dissolution and the property transfer that shouldn't exist legally, almost as if they'd rushed through the paperwork and counted on no one looking too closely. Meanwhile, I started collecting financial statements. Adam's company, Horizon Ridge Ventures LLC, wasn't hard to trace. Clara discovered that he'd used the trust fund not only for investment, but also to secure personal loans. The property itself had been used as collateral in at least 2 deals. He's leveraged the house, Clara said, eyes widening. He's basically bet your inheritance on his business succeeding. If it fails, the bank gets the property. A cold wave washed over me. Adam wasn't just greedy, he was reckless, and my parents had either turned a blind eye or actively helped him. One evening, I decided to drop by the house unannounced. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup. Dad was at the table reading the newspaper. Adam was on the couch, scrolling through his phone. The moment they saw me, the air shifted. Esme, Dad said slowly. We were going to call you. Were you? I said lightly, hanging my coat. Adam didn't look up. This whole lawyer thing is unnecessary, Esme. You're making a mess out of nothing. I walked closer, my expression calm. Then why forge my signature? His head snapped up. What? I held his gaze. You heard me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes just for a second. Then he masked it with a scoff. You're imagining things. Am I? Mom stepped in. Enough, we're not having this conversation right now. I smiled, a sharp, quiet smile. You're right, we're not. The court will. And then I turned and left, leaving them in stunned silence. In the car, I exhaled slowly. Clara was right, they were rattled, and rattled people make mistakes. The following week was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. My parents didn't come at me with lawyers. They came at me with memories. It started with small things. Mom dropping by my apartment just to bring you some of that lemon cake you love. Dad texting me photos of the garden in bloom. Adam even sent a casual, hey, how? Message, as if we hadn't practically drawn legal battle lines days earlier. The old me would have melted. I would have seen these gestures as peace offerings. But now, they just looked like carefully placed stepping stones meant to lead me back into the trap of family unity, where questions are inconvenient and forgiveness is expected without apology. I kept my distance, replying politely but vaguely. Clara noticed it right away. They're trying to soften you up, she said, flipping through more trust records at my table. Classic strategy, make you doubt your anger before they actually have to face the consequences. She wasn't wrong. On Wednesday evening, Mom invited me to dinner, just the 3 of us. Against my better instincts, I went. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted to hear what they'd say when they thought I was still pliable. I wore a small recorder under my cardigan, just like Clara suggested. The moment I walked into the house, I was hit by the smell of roast chicken and herbs, my childhood comfort food. Mom was bustling in the kitchen, her eyes lighting up when she saw me, like we'd simply had a small argument that could be solved over a good meal. Dad was already at the table, a bottle of wine uncorked. Esme, Mom said warmly, I'm so glad you came. I miss having you here. I've been busy, I replied evenly, taking a seat. Dad poured me a glass of wine. You've always worked so hard. Your grandfather would be proud of you, you know? It was a perfectly placed line, calculated to remind me of the bond I had with Grandpa, to make me feel like they still represented that legacy. We ate in near silence for a few minutes. Then Mom set her fork down delicately. Esme, honey, we really need to talk about all this legal stuff. It's unnecessary. Unnecessary, I repeated softly. Forgery, fraud, misappropriation, all unnecessary. She sighed, giving me that tired, martyred look she'd perfected over the years. This is tearing the family apart. You're letting outsiders get involved in something that should stay between us. By outsiders, you mean Clara? Mom hesitated. She's not family, Esme, and I worry she's filling your head with ideas that will hurt you in the long run. Lawyers are like that. They push people toward conflict. I almost laughed. Clara hadn't pushed me toward anything my parents' signatures had. Dad chimed in, his tone softer. We just want what's best for you. This is your home too. No one's taking anything away. We just thought Adam should lead. He's the eldest. It makes sense. The eldest. I'd heard that phrase all my life, like it was a universal trump card. Never mind that Adam couldn't manage a budget to save his life, or that he'd already drained the trust fund dry. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. Esme, sweetheart, don't ruin the family over paperwork. For a moment, I looked down at her hand resting over mine, the same hand that had helped forge my signature, and felt a kind of numb clarity. I gently pulled my hand back. I'm not ruining the family, Mom. I'm exposing the truth. There's a difference. Her eyes hardened just slightly. Dad's smile faltered. For a split second, the warm dinner table illusion cracked, and I saw the people behind it, cornered, calculating. They backed off after that, switching to lighter topics, old stories, mutual acquaintances, anything to patch the atmosphere. But the recorder caught everything. When I left the house that night, I stood in the driveway for a moment, staring up at the dark windows of my old bedroom. For years, that room had been my refuge. Now it was just another place where lies had lived comfortably. Clara listened to the recording later and nodded approvingly. Textbook, she said. They're trying to pull you emotionally back into the fold so they can weaken your case. You handled it perfectly. I was proud of myself. A little shaken, sure, because part of me still wanted my parents to be good, but proud. 2 days later, I ran into Claire at a coffee shop downtown. She looked genuinely surprised to see me. Esme, hey. I gave her a polite smile. Hi. She hesitated for a second, then lowered her voice. Can I ask you something? Is everything okay between you and Adam? And your parents? I blinked. That was unexpected. Why? She bit her lip. He's been tense lately, and I overheard him arguing with your dad about some money stuff. He doesn't know I heard. My pulse quickened. What kind of money stuff? I don't know the details, she said quickly. But it sounded serious. He mentioned something about the bank breathing down his neck and not letting Esme find out. My blood went cold. This was the twist I didn't see coming. Claire had no reason to lie to me, and the way she said it nervously, like someone who knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, told me this wasn't gossip. This was real. Claire, I said carefully, if you ever hear anything else like that, would you tell me? She hesitated, then nodded. I don't want to be in the middle of anything, but yeah, I'll tell you. As I walked back to my car, adrenaline buzzed through me. Adam wasn't just sitting on stolen property, he was under financial pressure, and that made him dangerous. But it also made him sloppy. Clara's reaction when I told her later was immediate. That's leverage, she said. If the bank is involved, we can subpoena financial records. This might go even deeper than we thought. I looked out the window at the harbor that night, feeling the wind whip against the glass. For years, my family had held all the cards. But now, piece by piece, their carefully built house of lies was beginning to splinter. And this time, I wasn't the one who was going to break. After Claire's revelation at the coffee shop, I couldn't shake the sound of her voice. The bank breathing down his neck. It replayed in my head during my shifts, on my drives home, even while brushing my teeth. Adam had always been reckless with money, but if he'd involved the house, my grandfather's house, as collateral, this wasn't just family betrayal anymore. This was a ticking bomb. I told Clara that night. She didn't hesitate. If the bank's involved, there's a paper trail, she said, typing furiously on her laptop. Mortgages, loan agreements, liens, they can't hide those, especially not if they used forged signatures again. The idea that Adam might have used my name again made my stomach twist. Within a few days, Clara filed a formal information request with the county records and the bank. Because my name was still legally tied to the trust, I had standing to ask questions about any encumbrances on the property. Meanwhile, I played it cool with the family. I didn't want to spook them. Mom kept texting me cheerful updates about wedding plans. Dad sent me links to home insurance policies, just in case I needed them. Adam was quiet, which was more telling than anything else. The silence broke on a Friday evening. I was at my apartment when my phone buzzed. Clara, check your email, she said the moment I picked up. Her voice had that controlled electric edge that meant something big had dropped. I opened my inbox. The subject line of the PDF attachment read, Mortgage, Horizon Ridge/Harper Property, Sunrise Bank. I clicked it open. And there it was. A mortgage agreement signed 8 months ago. The collateral property, my grandfather's house. The borrower, Adam Harper. The amount, $250,000. But the kicker? the section labeled Trust Beneficiary Consent. My name, my forged signature. Again, I sank into my chair. He mortgaged the house without my consent, I whispered. Clara's voice was steady. And forged your name to do it. Esme, this isn't just civil fraud anymore. This is bank fraud. That's federal. The gravity of it hit me like a wave. Adam hadn't just stolen from me, he'd potentially committed a felony. We combed through the document line by line. Clara's legal instincts kicked in, spotting irregularities in the notary, seal, and witness section. They rushed this, she said, probably to get cash quickly. The notary signature isn't even consistent with county records. Whoever notarized this either didn't verify identity properly or was in on it. I felt a surge of adrenaline, not fear this time, but a cold, focused determination. Can we use this? Oh, absolutely, Clara said. This isn't just evidence, this is leverage. The bank's going to want to know they're sitting on a fraudulent mortgage. And once they do, Adam's world will start crumbling fast. That weekend, Clara and I scheduled a quiet meeting with a bank compliance officer she knew from law school. We met at a nondescript cafe in Portland. She was a sharp woman in her 40s named Denise, with neatly tied-back hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who's seen too many shady deals. Clara slid the documents across the table. Denise scanned them, her expression tightening. This is bad, she said flatly. If what you're telling me is true, this mortgage could be void. And if the bank finds out they were defrauded, they'll move fast to protect their interests. They don't care about family drama, they care about fraud. I sipped my coffee slowly. So what happens if the bank confirms it's forged? They'll likely freeze Adam's access to the funds, initiate an internal investigation, and potentially refer it to federal authorities, Denise replied. If his business depends on this money, he's in trouble. On the drive home, Clara was practically glowing with strategic excitement. Esme, this is the crack in the dam. Once the bank turns on him, he won't just be dealing with you anymore. He'll be dealing with the system, and they don't play nice. I nodded, but my mind was already spinning ahead. Adam was cornered financially. If the bank froze his funds, his company would implode. And if that happened, my parents, who tied their financial future to him, would feel the aftershocks too. By Sunday, the storm began to show. Family dinner used to be routine, almost ritualistic. But that evening, the tension was thick. Mom's smile was brittle, Dad avoided eye contact, and Adam was pacing like a man with too many fires to put out. The moment I walked in, he pounced. What the hell are you doing, Esme? He snapped. I took off my coat slowly, keeping my voice calm. What do you mean? Don't play dumb, he hissed. The bank called me. They're reviewing the mortgage, something about signature verification. I didn't forge my own signature, Adam, I interrupted coolly. Mom jumped in, her voice shrill. Stop this is going too far. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Esme, this is your brother. You're going to ruin his life over some paperwork? I turned to him. He forged my name on a federal loan. That's not some paperwork. That's a crime. Adam's face flushed deep red. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's just a formality. The bank doesn't care. They care now, I said sharply. And soon, everyone else will too. He lunged toward me, jabbing a finger in my direction. You think you're so much better than us now. You think this is going to end with you sitting on a throne and me in jail? I didn't move. I don't need a throne, I just want what's mine. For a long moment, no one spoke. Mom's hands trembled. Dad's jaw worked like he wanted to say something but couldn't. And Adam looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Good, because I wasn't the Esme they were used to manipulating. When I left that night, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the house. It was still beautiful in the moonlight, but now every shingle, every brick looked like evidence waiting to be cataloged. Clara texted me as I drove home. Clara? The bank opened an investigation. Denise confirmed, it's starting. Me? Good, let him feel it. For years, I'd been the one holding my family together, the quiet caretaker in the background. Now, for the first time, I was the one pulling the threads and watching the fabric unravel. When the Harper family fights back, they don't do it halfway. Within a week of the bank launching its internal investigation, I noticed the shift. It started subtly, an email forwarded to me by an old family friend, Mrs. Henderson, with a subject line that read, "This doesn't sound like you, dear." The attached message was a forwarded thread from my mother. We're so heartbroken over what's happening with Esme. She's fallen under bad influence. She's trying to undo the family legacy. Pray for us. It was classic mom, layered with self-pity, a pinch of moral superiority, and carefully crafted to sound like she was the wounded party. I could practically hear her voice between the lines. We're the good parents. She's the lost daughter. Then came the calls, old neighbors, a distant aunt. Even the pastor from the church we'd gone to when I was little. All with some variation of, "Esme, what's going on? Your parents are so worried, you should forgive. Families shouldn't fight over money." I stayed polite but firm. It's not about money, it's about fraud. Most of them didn't know what to do with that answer. Fraud isn't something you toss around lightly in a small coastal town. People like their drama simple. Someone's selfish, someone's hurt, someone forgives. They don't like words like forgery and mortgage fraud. It makes them uncomfortable. And my parents knew that. They were trying to paint me as the cold, ungrateful daughter turning on the people who raised her. It didn't stop there. Adam, apparently, had hired a lawyer. A slick, tanned man named Gregory Myers from Portland, whose website screamed aggressive defense strategies. A few days later, Clara received a letter from him. Our client, Mr. Adam Harper, maintains that the property transfer and mortgage were executed with full familial consent. Any insinuation of fraud is not only defamatory but actionable. We demand that Ms. Harper cease her baseless claims or face legal consequences. Clara laughed when she read it. "They're posturing," she said, tossing the letter onto the table. "This is the legal equivalent of barking, but we're not going to ignore it." She drafted a measured, deadly response. Ms. Esme Harper stands by the authenticity of her claims, which are supported by notarized documentation, county records, and pending bank investigations. We advise Mr. Harper to consider his position carefully before escalating. Discovery will not be kind. I watched her send it with a kind of quiet awe. Clara had shifted from friend to legal pitbull without missing a beat, but the real blow came during Sunday dinner. I showed up because I wanted to look my parents in the eye, not as their daughter seeking approval, but as a woman who now held leverage. The house was less warm than usual. The moment I stepped inside, I saw a man in a navy suit sitting at the table next to Adam. Gregory Myers. He stood, flashing a polished smile. "You must be Esme, pleasure to meet you." "Likewise," I said flatly, though my stomach twisted. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a setup. Mom hovered nervously near the kitchen doorway. Dad was stone-faced. Adam leaned back like a king with his knight beside him. Gregory gestured for me to sit. "I'm here to help mediate this little misunderstanding." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling it now?" He smiled wider. "Family disputes can get messy, but I think we can all agree that dragging this through the courts and banks isn't in anyone's best interest." He started talking about amicable resolutions and mutually beneficial arrangements, his tone silky, practiced. Every few sentences, Adam threw in a jab about how I never cared about the house before, or how this is about jealousy, not justice. I let them talk, and talk. And talk. Finally, Gregory leaned forward. "Here, what Adam is proposing. He will keep the house since he's already made significant investments in it, and in return you'll receive a financial settlement, something fair to avoid messy public battles." My heart rate slowed almost eerily. I'd been expecting this. A payoff to make me disappear. I looked at Adam. "You want to buy me out of my own inheritance?" He smirked. "It's business, Esme, be smart." I leaned back, folding my arms. "No." The room stilled. Gregory cleared his throat. "Perhaps you should take some time to consider." I said no, I repeated. "The house is mine, the trust was mine, the bank fraud is yours, there's nothing to settle." Mom's voice cracked. "Esme, why are you doing this to us?" "To you," I laughed, sharp and humorless. "You forged my name, you stole my inheritance, you lied to my face. Don't twist this around." Adam's mask slipped for a second. "You think you're going to win? You're one person, we're a family." Met his eyes. "No, Adam, you're a fraud with a crumbling company, and the bank is already peeling back the wallpaper." Gregory stood abruptly, clearly not expecting resistance this firm. "We'll be in touch," he said, his smoothness cracking just a little. After they left, Mom cornered me in the hallway. Her hands shook as she gripped my arm. "You don't understand what you're doing, Esme. You're going to destroy this family." I looked down at her hand, then back at her face. "No, you already did." I walked out, leaving her in stunned silence. That night, Clara and I reviewed everything. Every conversation, every letter, every attempt to intimidate. It was all going into the growing case file. "This is exactly what we want," Clara said, tapping the thick binder. "They're reacting, they're emotional, and emotional people make mistakes. Keep doing what you're doing, keep your calm, let them unravel." I stared at the binder, feeling a strange mix of fury and clarity. For years, they dismissed me as the quiet one, the fixer, the background caretaker. Now they were throwing everything they had at me, lawyers, gossip, emotional manipulation, and it wasn't working. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one bending. They were. In the weeks that followed Gregory's visit, the Harper household started to crack, not in one loud explosion, but in a series of quiet, splintering sounds you'd only hear if you were really listening. And I was listening. The bank moved fast. Denise, the compliance officer, kept Clara updated discreetly. Adam's mortgage file had been flagged for internal fraud review, and the bank had frozen his line of credit while the investigation proceeded. Overnight, his company went from cash flow positive, his words, to gasping for air. I heard about it before my family did, thanks to Clara. Sunrise Bank issued a temporary freeze on Horizon Ridge's operational accounts, she said one morning, sipping her coffee. Adam's in trouble. By the end of that week, the trouble had a face. Adam showed up at my apartment building unannounced on a Thursday night, pounding on my door like the place was on fire. I opened it cautiously. He looked disheveled. His suit was wrinkled, his hair a mess, and his usual polished arrogance had been replaced by raw panic. "You did this," he spat. "Did what?" I said evenly. "The bank. They froze my accounts. I've got suppliers calling me, contractors threatening to walk. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said simply. "I told the truth." He let out a bitter laugh. "You think this is justice? You're ruining my life, Esme, our life, this house. It's supposed to be my future, Claire's future." "Then maybe you shouldn't have committed fraud to get it," I replied. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think the bank's going to side with you? You're just a nurse. You don't know how this works. You don't have the stomach for this fight." I looked him dead in the eyes. "You'd be surprised what I have the stomach for now." For a second, something flashed across his face, fear, recognition, before he turned on his heel and stormed off. Clara wasn't surprised when I told her. "He's unraveling," she said. "This is what happens when someone who's built their entire identity on control starts losing it. He's going to make mistakes. Big ones." And he did. A few days later, Claire showed up at my workplace. I was on break, sitting outside by the hospital fountain when she approached me nervously. "Esme," she said softly, "can we talk?" I hadn't expected that. She sat beside me on the stone ledge, wringing her hands. "I know this is weird, but I need to ask you something. Is Adam in serious trouble?" I hesitated. "Why are you asking me?" Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Because he won't tell me anything. He just keeps saying it. Under control. But creditors have been calling my phone. I saw letters from the bank, and last night, he snapped at me. He's not the same." For a moment, I saw a flash of the woman who'd stood under the rose archway during the engagement party, glowing with excitement. She didn't look like that now. She looked like someone realizing the ground beneath her feet wasn't stable after all. "I can't tell you everything," I said carefully. "But yes, he's in serious trouble. He forged my signature to take out a mortgage. The bank found out." Claire gasped, covering her mouth. "He what?" "It's not just me anymore," I added. "The bank's involved. This is going to get worse before it gets better." She stared at the ground for a long moment. "He said the house was his, that his parents gave it to him fair and square." I almost laughed. "His parents stole it from me, Claire. He's been building a future on someone else's inheritance." Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't know. For the first time, I believed her. She wasn't part of the scheme, she was a prop in it. She looked up at me then, something shifting in her expression. "If they ask me to lie, I won't." My breath caught. "Claire, I love him," she said, her voice trembling, "but I won't go down for something I didn't do." That was the first fracture. The second came from inside the house itself. According to one of our neighbors, and small towns have excellent unofficial intelligence networks, Adam and Dad had a screaming match in the backyard one evening. "Something about you said the bank wouldn't notice, and you promised me this house." Dad had always backed Adam without question, but even he had limits. With the bank breathing down their necks, the legal letters piling up, and Gregory Myers starting to realize this wasn't going to be a quick settlement, the Harper men were at each other's throats. Mom, meanwhile, tried doubling down on emotional appeals. She left voicemails that swung wildly between guilt trips and desperate pleas. "Esme, sweetheart, please think about your brother. He's under so much stress. This family can't survive if you keep pushing like this. I don't even recognize you anymore." I didn't delete them. Clara advised me to keep everything. "You're not just building a case for property and fraud," she said. "You're building a case for pattern, how they tried to manipulate you when their scheme started falling apart." Claire called me again 2 nights later. This time, her voice was more determined than scared. "I found something," she whispered. "In Adam's office. A second set of documents. He's planning to sell part of the land to a developer behind everyone's back. It's not even zoned for that yet, but he already signed a preliminary contract. If the bank seizes the house, he wants to cash out before they can." I froze. "Claire, can you get a copy?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I already did." I almost laughed out loud in disbelief. Claire's sweet, soft-spoken Claire had just handed me the next bombshell. That night, Clara and I sat in my living room, staring at the scanned contract Claire had sent. "He's desperate," Clara said. "This isn't strategy anymore. This is panic." And panic meant leverage. We drafted a quiet letter to Gregory Myers, attaching a redacted portion of the contract, not enough to show Claire's involvement, but enough to make it clear that we knew. "We are aware of Mr. Harper's recent attempt to enter into an illegal preliminary sale agreement involving contested property. Any further transactions will be added to the ongoing case." 2 days later, Gregory called Clara, sounding rattled. Adam had apparently exploded when he found out she knows. The house of cards was tilting, and for once, I wasn't underneath it. The letter from the county court arrived on a Tuesday morning. I just finished a grueling night shift and was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I saw it sitting in my mailbox, thick and official. I carried it inside carefully, as if it might detonate. Clara was already awake, sitting at my table with her laptop, cross-referencing case law like she'd been waiting for this moment. I slid the envelope across the table. She opened it with deliberate calm. "This is it," she said. "The court accepted our petition. Preliminary hearing is scheduled for 4 weeks from now." Hearing those words made my stomach flutter in a way that wasn't fear, but something close. This was real. No more letters, no more quiet strategizing. We were stepping onto the battlefield. The bank, meanwhile, had accelerated their investigation. Denise called Clara directly. "We've confirmed signature forgery and notary irregularities," she said. "Sunrise Bank is filing its own legal action to void the mortgage and recover funds. We're cooperating with your legal team." I stared at Clara, wide-eyed. "The bank's on our side now," she grinned. "Not because they like you, because they hate being defrauded. But yes, this just got a lot bigger." Adam had no idea what was coming, or maybe he did because 2 days later he showed up at my apartment again, not furious this time, but oddly subdued. "Esme," he started, his voice hoarse. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "About what?" "I screwed up," he muttered. "Okay." I didn't think it would get this far. I thought the bank wouldn't notice. Or if they did, we'd figure it out. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." "Then help me understand," I said quietly. He ran a hand through his hair. "I needed the money to keep Horizon Ridge afloat. We were so close to closing a big deal. If I hadn't gotten that loan, the company would have folded. Mom and Dad told me the house would be mine anyway, so you forged my name," I finished for him. He flinched but didn't deny it. "Adam," I said, voice steady, "this isn't something we can talk our way out of. There's a court date. There's a bank involved. This is bigger than family now." His expression hardened. "You're really going to let them drag me through court?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The silence said it all. He left without slamming the door this time. Somehow, that made it worse. As the hearing date approached, the tension in town grew. In a small community like ours, people notice everything. The Harpers had always been a pillar family, the kind everyone nodded to at church, the family whose house appeared on holiday postcards. Now whispers followed them everywhere. Mom avoided grocery stores during peak hours. Dad snapped at the hardware store clerk when someone mentioned court. Adam stopped showing up to social events altogether. Claire, however, was a different story. She called me one evening, voice shaking but resolute. "I've made a decision," she said. "What kind of decision?" "I can't keep pretending," she whispered. "I love him, Esme, I do, but he lied to me. He lied to everyone, and I'm not going to stand next to him in court and act like everything's fine. I already talked to my lawyer. I'm going to testify." I sat in stunned silence for a moment. "You're serious?" "Yes," her voice cracked. "I found out he planned to use some of the developer money to pay for our wedding. My wedding. Bought with stolen funds, I can't do it." I exhaled slowly. "Claire, this changes everything." "I know," she whispered. "I'll do the right thing." When I hung up, Clara's eyes sparkled like a general who just found the perfect flanking maneuver. "That," she said, "is your second big twist." The preliminary hearing took place in a modest courtroom downtown. Clara stood beside me, her tailored navy suit immaculate, her expression calm but sharp. Adam sat on the opposite side with Gregory Myers and our parents behind him. Mom clutched her rosary, eyes darting nervously. Dad's jaw was tight. Adam looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. The judge entered, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with reading glasses perched on her nose. "This is Harper v. Harper, case number 230812, the clerk announced. Petition regarding contested property transfer, alleged forgery, and related financial misconduct." It felt surreal hearing my last name repeated like that. Clara opened with quiet precision, laying out the facts. The original will naming me as sole heir, the forged waiver, the property transfer timeline, the fraudulent mortgage. She didn't raise her voice once, but every sentence landed like a hammer. Gregory tried to counter with claims of family misunderstanding and informal consent, but the judge wasn't having it. "Mr. Myers," she said sharply, "you're asking me to accept that a legally binding signature was forged as a misunderstanding?" Gregory stammered something about good faith. Then came the bombshell. Claire took the stand. She walked up slowly, hands clasped in front of her, looking both fragile and fierce. When Clara asked her if she was willing to testify truthfully, she said, "Yes," without hesitation. She recounted what she discovered: the developer contract, the mortgage documents, Adam's lies. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word. Gregory tried to discredit her, implying she was acting out of a breakup, but she didn't flinch. "I loved him," she said, looking directly at Adam. "But love doesn't make forgery disappear." Adam's face turned pale. Mom looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. By the time the hearing adjourned, the judge had scheduled a full trial and instructed the bank's legal team to coordinate with Clara's office. The words "potential criminal referral" hung heavy in the air. As we walked out of the courthouse, the autumn wind whipped my hair into my face. For a moment, I stopped on the steps and turned to look at the Harper family. Mom looked lost. Dad looked furious. Adam looked small. For the first time in my life, he didn't look like the golden boy. He looked like a man who'd built his future on stolen ground and was finally watching it sink beneath him. Clara nudged me gently. "You okay?" I took a deep breath. Better than I've been in years. The night after the preliminary hearing, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious, but because the silence was finally different. It wasn't the tense, uncertain silence I'd lived in for years, tiptoeing around my family's expectations. It was the silence of shifting power. For the first time, they were the ones scrambling. The local paper ran a small but noticeable piece the next morning. "Prominent Harper family faces legal battle over alleged forgery and fraud. A preliminary court hearing on Tuesday revealed a legal dispute between siblings Esme and Adam Harper over their late grandfather's estate. Allegations include forged documents, a contested mortgage, and potential criminal referral involving Sunrise Bank." It was factual, not sensational. But in a town like ours, that was enough to light the match. By noon, everyone knew. The whispers at the diner, the cashier at the pharmacy giving me sympathetic looks, even patients at the hospital asking softly, "Are you the Harper from the paper?" Meanwhile, my parents were drowning in the one thing they valued most: public image. Mom called me that night, her voice shaky and tear-streaked. "Esme, do you have any idea what you've done? People are looking at us like we're criminals." "Maybe," I said quietly, "because you committed a crime." She gasped like I'd slapped her. "How can you say that to your own mother?" "Because it's the truth, Mom. You and Dad signed over my inheritance to Adam. You let him forge my name. And now that people know, you're embarrassed. That's not my fault." She didn't respond, just a long, shaky breath before hanging up. Adam didn't take the spotlight well. According to Claire, who surprisingly still heard updates through mutual friends, his contractors started pulling out. Suppliers demanded upfront payments he couldn't make. Investors distanced themselves. He started avoiding town altogether, driving his truck late at night to and from the property like some desperate squatter guarding a fortress that was already crumbling. And inside the house, things got ugly. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Donnelly, called me one evening. She sounded hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should be telling me. "I don't mean to intrude, dear," she said in her gentle southern accent. "But I heard quite a shouting match the other night. Your father and Adam. It was about the bank and something about you ruined this family." I thanked her. I wasn't surprised. For decades, Dad had stood behind Adam no matter what. Now, with criminal charges on the table and their reputation shredded, that unwavering loyalty was cracking. Clara, meanwhile, was in full legal warrior mode. She began prepping for trial like a seasoned tactician, stacking documents, witness lists, forensic handwriting reports, and deposition summaries. My kitchen table had become a command center. "Right now," she said one night, spreading files across the table, "they're in reaction mode. Don't respond to their emotional bait. Don't get dragged into backroom negotiations. We hold steady. The facts are on our side." I nodded. "I don't plan on backing down." She gave me a small smile. "Good. Because the next few weeks are going to get uglier." She was right. A week later, Gregory Myers sent a new letter not to Clara, but to me directly. It was slickly worded, full of phrases like settlement offer, avoid further embarrassment for all parties, and preserve family dignity. They offered me a financial payout again, bigger this time. a lump sum and a non-disclosure agreement that would effectively erase everything from the public record if I accepted. I stared at the letter for a long time. There was a part of me, a very small, tired part, that imagined how easy it would be to take the money, move somewhere new, and never look back. I'd spent so many years fighting for their approval, for scraps of recognition. Now I could walk away and let them rot in their own mess. But that wasn't justice. I handed the letter to Clara. She didn't even blink. "We're rejecting this," she said, "with prejudice." "Send it," I said. The public pressure got worse for my parents. They weren't just losing in court, they were losing their social footing. My father's business acquaintances started distancing themselves. Mom's charity board asked her to temporarily step down. Church friends stopped inviting them to events. I knew it must have been humiliating. For years, they'd built their identity on being the perfect family. Now everyone saw the cracks. I'd expected their anger. What I didn't expect was my mother showing up at my door one Sunday morning. Alone, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. No pearls, no carefully styled hair, just a woman holding a worn leather purse in trembling hands. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table now buried in legal documents, and stared at her hands for a long time before speaking. "I didn't want it to go this far," she whispered. "I thought we could fix it quietly." "You forged my name, Mom," I said gently but firmly. "Quiet doesn't fix that," she winced. "It wasn't supposed to hurt you. Your father and we thought Adam could manage the estate better. You're always so busy with work, and he seemed like the natural choice." I laughed softly. "Natural choice? He mortgaged the house and nearly lost it to the bank. That's your natural choice." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I thought we were doing what was best for the family." There it was again, that phrase. For the family, always the justification for every betrayal. I took a deep breath. "Mom, what you did was for the family. It was for Adam, and you need to own that." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a fleeting moment I saw something crack inside her, not just fear but realization. She stood after a long silence. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, "but I hope one day you'll understand." She left without another word. I sat there for a long time, staring at the door after it closed. For the first time, I didn't feel like a child begging for answers. I felt like someone who'd finally stopped chasing approval. In the final weeks before trial, Clara and I tied every loose end. Claire provided her full deposition under oath. The bank submitted its forensic reports. My grandparents, lawyer, sent over old trust correspondence that clearly named me as the intended heir. Piece by piece, the puzzle was complete. The Harper family had spent years building an image. I'd spent months dismantling it. And soon, in that courtroom, the world would see the truth laid bare. The morning of the trial felt like stepping into another version of my life. I stood in front of the courthouse in my navy dress and beige coat, clutching a leather folder to keep my hands from trembling. The air was crisp and biting, the kind of Maine autumn morning that smelled like wet leaves and distant bonfires. Clara stood beside me, calm as ever, scrolling through her notes on her tablet. "This is it," she said simply. I nodded. "I know." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. A few journalists occupied the back row, local residents whispered behind their hands, and somewhere near the aisle, Mrs. Donnelly clutched a thermos like it was a talisman. My parents sat on one side of the courtroom, rigid and pale. Mom kept her eyes down, clutching a handkerchief. Dad sat stiffly, jaw clenched, refusing to look at me. Adam sat between Gregory Myers and another younger associate. His once polished confidence had curdled into something brittle. He looked thinner, worn down, but when his eyes met mine across the room, there was still a flash of that old defiance. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. "This court is now in session," the clerk announced. "Case number 230812, Harper v. Harper, concerning contested estate transfer, forgery, and fraudulent mortgage." Hearing my last name announced like that never stopped feeling surreal. Clara opened with quiet precision. She walked the judge through the original will, the trust documents, the timeline of Adam's forgery, the mortgage, and finally the bank's fraud findings. Each piece of evidence clicked into place like a lock turning. Then she called me to the stand. I took a breath and stepped up, placing my hand on the Bible. "I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." Clara's questions were gentle but firm, letting me tell my story in my own words. I described how I discovered the transfer, the forged signature, the emotional manipulation that followed. I spoke clearly, without tears. Years of silence poured out of me, steady and undeniable. Gregory tried to rattle me during cross-examination. Miss Harper, he began smoothly, isn't it true that you had little involvement with the family property after your grandfather passing? I lived in the house until I was 18, I replied. I helped maintain it every summer. I was told the property was part of my future. He smiled faintly. But you didn't contest the transfer immediately. Why wait? I looked him straight in the eye. Because I didn't know they forged my signature. I found out through legal documents and a bank notice. And when I did, I acted. A few murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Claire's testimony was next. She walked up with her head high, though her hands shook as she swore in. Clara guided her through her discovery of the developer contract, the financial irregularities, and Adam's lies. She spoke with a quiet sadness that made the courtroom lean in. Gregory tried to undermine her credibility, suggesting she was acting out of heartbreak. I loved him, she said simply. But love doesn't make forgery legal. It doesn't make stealing okay. Her voice cracked just once when she mentioned the wedding being funded with stolen money, but she didn't falter. Adam's face hardened as she spoke, his jaw clenching tighter with each word. Then came the bank's representative, Denise. She presented the forensic handwriting report, the notary irregularities, and the bank's fraud investigation results. It was clinical, devastating, and impossible to refute. The signature on the mortgage documents does not match Ms. Harper's verified signature on file, she explained. Additionally, the notary who stamped the document has admitted to processing the papers without proper ID verification. The mortgage was obtained fraudulently. Even the judge's expression tightened at that. Gregory's defense strategy crumbled under the weight of the evidence. He tried to argue family misunderstanding, but Claire's testimony had already dismantled that. He tried to argue Esme had abandoned her claim, but the trust language was airtight. He even attempted to discredit the bank's report, a rookie mistake. Clara was relentless on rebuttal. This isn't a misunderstanding, she said clearly. This was a calculated forgery, a fraudulent mortgage, and an attempt to strip my client of her legal inheritance. It is documented, verified, and corroborated by multiple parties, including the defendant's own fiancé. You could feel the air shift in the courtroom when she said that. The final moment came when Adam took the stand. He looked miserable but still tried to salvage his narrative. He admitted to signing my name to speed things up, claiming he believed he had family consent. Clara's eyes sharpened like a hawk spotting prey. Mr. Harper, she said smoothly, you forged a legal signature on a mortgage application worth $250,000. Did you consult your sister before doing this? No, he muttered. Did you inform the bank that you were not the legal trust beneficiary? No. And you consider that a misunderstanding? Adam shifted uncomfortably. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. That line hung in the air like smoke. Clara delivered her final blow calmly. Your Honor, this case is not about family disagreements. It is about fraud, plain and simple. The judge didn't give a verdict immediately. Civil trials rarely work like TV, but her expression as she reviewed the evidence spoke volumes. She scheduled the ruling for the following month, citing extensive evidence to consider. But even without the final verdict, the damage was done. When we exited the courthouse, journalists swarmed outside. Flashes popped. Someone shouted, Esme, do you feel vindicated? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The Harper family's carefully crafted image had been stripped bare, and the truth had finally been spoken, not whispered, not buried under for the family, but in the clear, echoing walls of a courtroom. My parents hurried to their car, heads down. Adam stood on the steps for a moment, staring at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe he didn't, because the girl he'd once dismissed was gone. I walked down those courthouse steps with Clara beside me, shoulders back, lungs full of cold autumn air, feeling something I hadn't in years: power. The weeks following the trial felt like the world had been holding its breath. Every morning, I checked the mailbox for the letter that would decide everything. Clara assured me that judges often took their time with rulings, especially in cases involving both civil property law and fraud. But patience had never been my strong suit. In town, the atmosphere was electric. The Harper case had become the talk of every diner, grocery aisle, and church coffee hour. Whispers followed me everywhere, but they weren't pitying whispers anymore. They were curious, respectful even. I'd spent so long shrinking myself in this town that I almost didn't recognize what it felt like to stand tall. The ruling arrived on a gray Thursday morning. I found the envelope in my mailbox, crisp and thick, with the court seal stamped on the corner. My hands shook as I brought it inside. Clara was already on her way over. She wanted to be there when I opened it. She burst into my apartment 15 minutes later, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, a legal pad under her arm. "This is it," I whispered. She smiled softly. "You ready?" I nodded and tore the envelope open. The words blurred for a moment, but then they came into focus. "The court hereby finds in favor of the petitioner, Ms. Esme Harper. The property transfer is declared null and void. The mortgage contract is voided on grounds of fraudulent signature. Sole ownership of the Harper estate shall revert to the petitioner. The respondent, Mr. Adam Harper, is ordered to repay funds to Sunrise Bank and may be subject to further criminal proceedings." I sank into my chair, breathless. Clara read over my shoulder, her grin widening with each paragraph. "You did it," she said quietly. "No, we did it." I laughed, half in disbelief, half in sheer relief. "Clara, I got the house back." She squeezed my hand. "You got your life back." The fallout was immediate. Sunrise Bank officially filed fraud charges against Adam within a week of the ruling. Federal investigators got involved. Mortgage fraud wasn't something they took lightly. Adam's accounts were frozen permanently this time. Contractors sued him for unpaid work. His company, Horizon Ridge, declared bankruptcy within a month. He tried to call me once. I didn't answer. My parents, that was more complicated. Dad withdrew into himself, spending most days at home, avoiding public appearances. His once booming voice at town meetings went silent. Mom stepped down from every social and charity committee she'd once dominated. Her friends, the same ones who used to gush about how lucky Esme was to have such a perfect family, suddenly kept their distance. They became ghosts in a town that once worshipped their image. I didn't rejoice in their humiliation, but I didn't shield them from it either. The day the house officially reverted to my name, Clara drove me out to the property. It was early evening, the sun setting over the harbor, painting the old shingles gold. The house looked both exactly the same and entirely different. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like something stolen. It felt like mine. I stood in the driveway, the same one where I'd once watched my parents sign it away, and took a deep breath. The air smelled like pine and sea salt. "This is yours now," Clara said, handing me the keys. I turned them over in my hand, the metal warm from her palm. "I never thought I'd see this day," she smiled. "Oh, I did." We walked through the house slowly. The creaky floorboards, the old fireplace where Grandpa used to tell stories, the window seat where I used to read on rainy days. It wasn't just property. It was memory, legacy. And now, Justice, Adam's fall became public spectacle. Claire officially broke off the engagement, releasing a quiet statement through her lawyer about irreconcilable differences and misrepresentation. She testified fully in the bank's criminal case, sealing his fate. Mom tried once more to reach out. She showed up at the house a few weeks after the ruling, unannounced, holding a pie like this was Thanksgiving circa 2005. "Esme," she began softly, "can we talk?" I let her in, but this time I set the tone. She walked through the house like a stranger, her eyes darting to familiar corners, probably remembering the days she felt she controlled it all. "I miss you," she said finally. I didn't answer right away. "I miss the idea of family," I said, "not what it actually was." She flinched. "I didn't want it to end like this," she whispered. "It didn't have to," I replied. "You made choices, so did Dad. And so did Adam, now you're living with them." Tears welled up, but she didn't argue. For once, there were no guilt trips, no for the family, just silence. When she left, I closed the door gently. There was sadness, yes, but there was no more longing. In the weeks that followed, I started reclaiming the house piece by piece. I fixed the leaky roof, repainted the porch, cleared out the junk Adam had left behind. Each brushstroke, each nail hammered, felt like rewriting the story they'd tried to steal from me. Neighbors would stop by to say hello. "Good to see someone taking care of the place again," Mrs. Donnelly said one afternoon, handing me a basket of muffins. It felt peaceful. I wasn't naive. The wounds were deep. My relationship with my parents might never fully recover. Adam would face consequences that would ripple through all of us. But for the first time in my life, the weight wasn't on my shoulders. It was where it belonged. And standing on that porch as autumn turned to winter, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe for years. I wasn't just surviving, I was free. The winter after the trial arrived quietly, like a soft exhale after a storm. Snow blanketed the harbor, and for the first time in years, the house felt warm. Not because of family dinners or holiday decorations, but because every corner finally belonged to me again. I'd always imagined that winning would feel like fireworks, like some cinematic moment where everything falls perfectly into place. But the truth was quieter, steadier. Justice didn't come with trumpets. It came with peace. I spent the first few weeks after the ruling in a strange rhythm, working my hospital shifts, coming home to a house that no longer felt haunted, and slowly, carefully, restoring what had been neglected. I repainted the hallway where my mother used to hang family portraits. The walls had yellowed with time. I chose a soft, sea glass blue, the color of early morning light on the harbor. I repaired the old window seat in the living room, the one where Grandpa used to sit with me and read. The cushion was threadbare, the wood beneath it warped, but I sanded and stained it until it shone again. One snowy afternoon, I found a small wooden box tucked in the back of a kitchen cabinet. Inside were a few of Grandpa's letters, bundled with twine. One of them was addressed to me. Esme, if you're reading this, I hope it means this house is still in the family and that you know your worth. Never let anyone tell you you're less than what you are. This home is yours because you have the heart to protect it, not because of birth order, not because of titles, because of who you are. Grandpa, I sat on the floor of the kitchen, the letter trembling in my hands, tears slipping down my cheeks, not from grief, but from a sense of finally being seen. All those years of being overlooked, silenced, underestimated, he had seen me clearly all along. Clara became a near-permanent fixture at the house. She'd stop by after work, her arms full of files or groceries, sometimes both. We'd sit on the porch, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot cider and watching the snow fall. "You realize," she said one night, "you just set a legal precedent for trust beneficiaries in this county. I've already had 2 lawyers call me asking for your case file." I laughed. "So I'm famous now?" In legal circles, absolutely. But beyond the legal headlines, there was something quieter happening inside me. For so long, my identity had revolved around trying to earn my family's approval. Every decision, every act of kindness was an unspoken plea: see me, choose me, and now I didn't need that anymore. I wasn't fighting for scraps of validation. I was standing in a house that was mine by right, surrounded by the life I had built, not the one they'd tried to dictate. Christmas that year was different. No big family dinner, no forced smiles. I decorated the house alone, stringing up warm white lights along the porch, hanging a simple wreath on the door. Clara joined me for hot chocolate by the fire on Christmas Eve. It was quiet, peaceful, honest. At midnight, I stood by the window and looked out at the snow-covered yard. The town was silent. The stars were sharp and bright in the cold sky. And for the first time since I was a child, I didn't feel like something was missing. I wasn't naive. The scars would take time to heal. My parents still lived in town, navigating their new, quieter lives. Adam was facing criminal charges, and I had no idea if he'd ever try to speak to me again. But that was their path. Mine was here, in this house, in this moment, finally standing in the light. By late winter, the rhythm of my days had settled into something new. Mornings began with sunlight spilling through the freshly painted kitchen windows, catching the steam rising from my coffee mug. I'd stand at the counter, watching the harbor slowly wake up, fishing boats slipping through the cold water, gulls circling overhead. It wasn't the dramatic, new beginning I used to imagine during the darkest nights of the legal battle. It was simpler, quieter, better. Work at the hospital kept me grounded. My colleagues, who had watched everything unfold from the sidelines, treated me with a mix of respect and gentle curiosity. Some would slip in comments like, "You've been through hell," or "You're stronger than you think." For once, I believed them. I started taking extra shifts not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. Clara teased me about becoming a workaholic again, but this time, it felt different. I wasn't escaping anything. I was building something. My parents, meanwhile, had become almost invisible in town. Dad resigned from several local boards. Mom rarely appeared at church anymore, and when she did, her once commanding presence had softened into something hesitant. People didn't treat them cruelly, they just treated them differently. No more pedestal, no more automatic reverence. We didn't speak often, but one day in February, I ran into Mom at the grocery store. She looked older not just in the way time ages us, but in the way regret does. She hesitated before approaching me. "Esme," she said softly. "Hi, Mom." We stood there for a few seconds in the produce aisle, surrounded by the smell of citrus and the hum of fluorescent lights. It felt surreal after all the courtroom drama, the shouting, the betrayal, to be face to face over a pile of oranges. "I heard you're fixing up the house," she said. "I am. It must be a lot of work." "It is," I replied. "But it's mine, I like it." She nodded slowly. "I'm glad." For a moment there was silence. Not the strained silence of old, but something more fragile. She didn't apologize, not fully. But there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before: recognition. We parted with a quiet, awkward goodbye. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Adam didn't reach out. The last I heard from Clara, his criminal case was moving forward. The bank was relentless. His company was finished. I didn't celebrate his downfall. Honestly, I felt nothing. A strange neutrality that came when anger finally burned itself out. He had made his choices. I had made mine. As spring approached, the house began to change with the season. I planted herbs by the kitchen window, repaired the back fence, and sanded the banister Grandpa had built decades ago. Clara teased me that I was becoming weirdly domestic, but there was joy in these quiet acts of reclamation. For so long, my energy had been spent fighting. Now it could finally flow into living. One Saturday afternoon, as I painted the porch railing, Mrs. Donnelly walked by with her dog. "It's good to see someone taking care of this place again," she called out. I smiled. "It's good to be home." She nodded knowingly, like she'd been waiting to hear me say that. Every once in a while, I'd catch myself looking at old family photos I'd tucked away in a drawer. Birthdays, Christmas mornings. Me and Adam running through the yard as kids. For years, those pictures had felt like evidence of something lost. Now they felt like history, not destiny. I didn't need to erase them. I just didn't need to live inside them anymore. Clara and I often spent evenings on the porch, sipping wine, talking about everything and nothing. "You know," she said one night, "you could sell the house, take the money, move somewhere sunny, start over completely." I laughed. "And leave all this behind." She raised an eyebrow. "You've certainly earned the right to." I looked out over the yard, the budding trees, the harbor beyond. "Maybe one day, but right now I want to stay. I want to build something here, for me." She clinked her glass against mine. "Then that's exactly what you should do." And in that moment, under a sky slowly filling with spring stars, I realized something simple and profound. I wasn't living in reaction to my family anymore. I was living for myself. Spring arrived fully by late April, and with it came a kind of quiet clarity I hadn't felt in years. The house was alive again. The shutters were freshly painted, the gardens were waking up, and the salty breeze carried the promise of summer through every open window. Sometimes I'd catch myself just standing in the doorway, watching the light spill across the floors, and realize I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. For so long, my life had been defined by them. My parents' expectations, Adam's entitlement, the family's image. Every choice I'd made had been shaped by the need to keep the peace, to be the good daughter, to prove my worth in a house where I'd always been treated like a guest. But the moment I stood up, truly stood up, everything changed. I lost things along the way, the illusion of family harmony, the comfort of being liked. Even some people in town who couldn't handle seeing the Harpers in court pulled away. But what I gained was far greater. I gained my voice, my legacy, my freedom. On the first warm Saturday of spring, I invited Clara over for a small gathering. Nothing fancy, just wine, music, and a few close friends on the porch. As the sun set over the harbor, painting the sky in gold and rose, Clara raised her glass. "To Esme," she said, "for fighting when it mattered most." I laughed, a little embarrassed. "It wasn't just me," she shook her head. "You were the one who walked into that house with nothing but the truth and refused to back down. That matters." I looked around the porch at the people who'd chosen to be here, not out of obligation, but because they cared. And for a moment, the years of hurt, betrayal, and silence faded into something softer. Later that night, after everyone left, I walked down to the edge of the property where the fence met the harbor. The water was calm, dark, reflecting the stars like scattered glass. I thought about my grandfather, about the letter I'd found, his unwavering belief in me even when no one else had seen it. I thought about my parents, about how love and harm can live in the same house, tangled and messy, about how forgiveness doesn't mean erasure and boundaries don't mean cruelty. And I thought about myself, the girl who'd once stood in the same yard, mug of coffee in hand, watching her inheritance disappear in front of her eyes. She didn't know then that she had the strength to burn the lies down to their bones, but she does now. People like to say justice feels like triumph, but to me, it felt like truth. Uncomplicated, unapologetic. The truth didn't change the past. It didn't magically heal the wounds, but it set me free. Free to choose who I let into my life. Free to decide what family means. Free to build a future not out of fear, but out of choice. Before heading inside, I turned back to look at the house one more time. The windows glowed softly in the night. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof. Proof that standing up, even when your voice shakes, can change everything. And as the cool breeze wrapped around me, I whispered to the quiet night, maybe to my younger self, maybe to the house itself, we made it.